Alright guys, welcome back. Here we are in the training camp in Magdeburg. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to train and start the season with a focus on the displays. Today me and Ray will go up in a two-ship formation flight. I'm in the Mustang on the wing of Ramon in the P-38. Alright, let's do it. We've had a thorough briefing and discussed the few things that we're going to do. The maneuvers that we plan to do are quite the same in warbirds. You know, it's not too advanced. It's mainly rolls and loops and wing-overs and barrels, big gentleman aerobatics maneuvers, and they generally happen between 2.5 and 4 Gs. That's the plan. We try to keep the Gs low so these airplanes don't get stressed too hard. Obviously they could do double this.
Daddy long legs have been sitting in here
during the war, but it's important to be gentle with them so they last forever. You always fly with the parachutes. Obviously it's for the obvious reasons of being able to jump if you have a massive uncontrolled fire or that the airplane cannot be controlled. Very often when you fly displays, you are in the gray zone of what is possible to jump out of or not, but we always try to have a high energy display, so either you have the altitude to go or you have the energy to at least maneuver somewhere where you can get out of the airplane. In addition, it's our cushion that we sit on. For the communication, we have a combination. We try to find the ultimate combination, but it is largely a passive system. We have in-air systems like the access system that gives us protection from the outside, from the sound and the noise of the engines, but also that we can communicate as clear as we can. We also try to use active noise reduction, but it's sometimes very hard with the warbirds and those very powerful engines. All right, now we are fully strapped in. Let's fire these babies up. Both the P-38 and the Mustang have V12s. It's 2 Allisons versus 1 Merlin. But in terms of warming up and heating up and the start procedure and stuff, they're quite similar. It's a little bit of a symphony to get this going because it's left and right hands and after a while you get to know each engine, and pretty much all engines are a little bit different. So when you fly them a bit, you get to know how they work and how they start.
And Bernd, the lightning formation.
So lightning formation when ready. Taxi, backtrack, runway 14. The wind is from the southeast with about 3 to 5 knots.
Cockpit, backtrack for the 1 boy as soon as the Mustang is also on frequency.
Mustang is on.
You ready for taxi?
Affirm.
Okay. Commencing taxi then.
Roger, and the QNH is 1022.
Cockpit 1022, however, flying QFE.
So the trucks are away. I try to keep my hands clear so the ground crew knows that I'm not touching anything. Obviously, it's a big propeller that's going to cause a lot of trouble if you're not careful around it. So I always try to be very transparent with the ground crew so we avoid any injuries. Although the airplane you can fly with and without oxygen, but it is dramatically improving communications when you fly with an oxygen mask. Just that little shelter around the microphone helps a lot. Having said that, we could probably fly the whole sortie without even speaking to each other because of good briefings and we've flown together a long time. We are fortunate enough to train a lot, and that helps in any aspect. Here in Maribor in Slovenia we have the whole airfield for ourselves, and it's a wonderful place to train. It's a nice long runway, and we go outside the control zone and train a bit, and then when we are ready we can come in and do a display over the field. Depending on the outside temperature and how cold it was during the night, and if it's the first flight of the day, you probably have to taxi for a while and warm up the engine for maybe about 10 minutes. We'd like to see a minimum of 40 degrees on the oil and also 60 degrees on the coolant. That's an absolute minimum, but very often we see a bit more than that.
Lightning formation, you ready?
Anytime, lightning formation.
Geared for takeoff, rendezvous 14. The wind is from southeast with about 5 knots.
With takeoff 14, lightning formation. Falling.
So even though you can't see it here, I can see the lightning. Obviously, it's a safer option to be able to see the other airplane when you do a formation takeoff. In a tail dragger, if you're number 2, you can't see the airplane in front. So if they can't tell you that they have a problem, also is a risk that you can run into them. So it's better to be close and to see what's happening.
Lightning formation, you're geared into your starting position.
To be able to take off and follow the lightning, it's important for the lightning to take off flap, otherwise it will just run away from the Mustang. But if you use take off flap, it's easier to hang on to it. Obviously 2 Allisons versus 1 Merlin is a bit unfair, and it has more lift as well with that big wing.
1360 left.
The Lightning is a wonderful airplane, and so is the Mustang, but the Lightning is much bigger and much heavier, and it does create a lot of vortices around it, so you can really feel it when you start getting close to it. And if you get too close, it might actually start to pull you in towards the airplane. So it's not easy to find that perfect position that you can, in peace, fly formation in a nice position, and that's also predictable.
And the lightning formation will be anytime ready to come in.
Roger, lightning formation, you're cleared into the box for display overhead.
Into the box, Cockpit, lightning formation.
So the Allison doesn't have an automatic barometric adjustment of the manifold pressure, so you have to treat it like a radial engine. You have to make sure that you manipulate the throttle to ensure that you don't overboost or underboost the engine.
Diving in.
So usually when we're diving in from about 5,000 feet, we set about somewhere between 32 and 34 inches on the Lightning, and then you just leave it there, probably around 2,500 RPM, so you're not going to overboost or underboost. But the Mustang will then have 2,700 RPM and up to 46 inches for max continuous display power to play with, and that's usually enough. On the top of the loop, though, you really feel the difference in the massive wing on the Lightning, and the Mustang is obviously a more or less symmetrical wing, and it does the angle of attack. If that builds up too much, you create a lot of induced drag, and you get spit out immediately on the way down if you're not really careful on the top. What also helps if the speed on the top is a bit closer to maybe 130, 140 knots, that makes it easier than like 110, for example. And it's always the question of you fly best on the right side or left side, and I try to master both sides, but most pilots are used to flying on the right side and always rolling to the left. It's a fact of life. Things about flying a dissimilar aircraft in formation with these engines are the engine management. We try to be as careful with the throttle as you can. The inline engines may be a little bit more forgiving than the radials, but it does take a lot of practice, and the more practice you do, the less throttle movement you can get away with, because you can anticipate and do small and slow movements instead of being reactive. One of the hardest maneuvers, I think, personally, is the barrel roll, and when you start off on the inside, because when the last 180 degrees of the roll, you create or you fly a bigger circle than the lead. And you really have to add power, and when you think you got to add power, you're too late. So that anticipation is crucial to make it work. Obviously, if you're on the outside, you have to have a lot of power initially, but then you have to obviously reduce a lot more when you are inside on the last half. It all depends on which position you are in, and then adjust it from there. Now we're into the tail chase, which is a fantastic set of maneuvers to do. So here the Lightning can open up the taps a bit more, but I have to work a lot harder in the Mustang to then keep up, and I have to do it by geometry, so I have to cut corners. Yeah, so I set max continuous to say 2700 RPM and 46 inches, and pretty much leave it there, and then I use geometry to try to keep up. The smoke is great for the public, but it's also great for me as a wingman to see where the wingtip vortices from the Lightning is, because it is a big aircraft. It's not quite a B-25, but it creates a lot of vortices. And the last thing you want to do is if you do a low pass at 50 feet and end up in the vortices, and it can easily turn you upside down with you trying to fight it with full controls.
45 degrees off.
So it's really important to anticipate where the wingtip vortices are, but the smoke helps, of course, to avoid it.
And another turn.
So even with geometry, it's hard to keep up sometimes with the Lightning, because at the top of the turn, when you're low on airspeed, if you pull too hard, try to get on the inside, the angle of attack builds up, and so does the drag, and then it just takes forever to get the speed back. So sometimes you just gotta let it go and try to catch him in the next turn or maneuver. So this is a tail chase, and we can also be up to 4 airplanes usually in this sort of thing, and we try to stay as close as you can, so number 3 and 4 doesn't get too drug out. It's not quite close trail, but you try to stay within a couple of 100 feet. When you fly on the wing, it's obviously you're a slave to the airspeed and the altitude pretty much of the lead. You can cross-check a little bit what's going on in the peripheral vision, and a few glances inside the cockpit every now and then. But when you fly the tail chase, you have a little bit more capacity to double-check speeds and altitudes, fuel, engine, instruments, and etc. So as a lead, if you have the capacity and it all works, you try to just anticipate, just to tell the wingman what's going on next, maybe the next or next 2 maneuvers, so you can plan a little bit ahead and start early cutting the corners. But it's something that you can fly even if you didn't speak, because it's you just follow along in the back.
Turn out and then coming for the last autobahn.
When you join up with a jet, it's a lot easier, because you can almost do a carefree handling, certainly with more modern jets, and you have speed brakes, so it's like child's play compared to a radial engine or a piston engine like this, that you have to be really careful and take your time to make sure that you don't underboost or overboost the engine. So it takes a little bit longer, but it's also really rewarding when you get there and you get there in time. But it is important for the lead to cater for this, to make sure that you give the wingman time.
Your 105 formation starting up.
A photo pass at the end is quite nice, because you can really throttle back, and you can let the engine relax a bit, because it's been working hard for max continuous power for some time. So you fly a bit slower, it's easier for the people to take a good photo, and it buys us time to start slowly cooling down the engine before we come in to land. So usually a few minutes before we land, we start opening up the coolant doors.
Information here, clear to land runway 14, the wind is the same, about easterly heading, southeasterly heading 5 to 8 knots.
That helps the engine, helps the longevity of the engines, because you start reducing the temperature slowly. So normally you'll start on the Mustang, you start opening the coolant doors, the coolant door and the oil cooler door, and the same with the Lightning. I usually take off and land mostly with the canopy open on the tail draggers. It's just an extra layer of safety in case something were to happen, if the gear collapses or something and you end up on your back, you have a chance to get out. Because if you land with the canopy open, you end up upside down. It becomes a really hard thing to get out. The Lightning, you land usually on short final by 100 knots, and then you start flaring it out, and you obviously can see anything. It's a tricycle gear, a Landomatic airplane, so it's super nice and gentle to land. Mustang is a little bit more tricky, but if you're on speed and just look ahead and make sure you're pointing straight down the runway. Sometimes you need to have a little bit of bank on, not to make sure you got any side slip on when you land. But apart from that, it's a breeze.
Mustang, we would be ready.
Roger, after the Mustang passing, you are cleared to cross the runway and cleared for your display overhead.
So that was a pretty good run through.
Behind the Mustang, cleared for the display. Helicopter formation.
And it's now back in for a debrief and tea and medals.
Okay, vehicle ready? Ready.
For the training we did, actually it was the first formation we have flown this year. It worked out pretty well, so I was very happy about it. So we went into the area for 10-15 minutes of training. After we came into the field or overhead the field and did a couple of figures, the two-ship formation, yeah, which worked out quite great. So I hope we have done a good job.
First formation practice of the day, or actually of the year for me. It's hard work, but it worked pretty well. We did the same routine as we finished off with the last year, and it seems to be pretty good. Makes a difference when you take the racks off, because we have the racks and the smoke pods on the Mustang normally for single ship, but they need to come off to be able to keep up with the lightning, especially going downhill. But yeah, it seems to be working pretty good. So we'll just continue on the same thing again. And actually, after lunch, we'll swap around. So I'll lead Raymond and give him the workout.
Worked out quite nice, yeah.